The Gestapo called her the White Mouse because she always slipped through their fingers, but Nancy Wake was far more dangerous than any mouse. By 1943, she had become the most wanted person in France, with a 5 million franc price on her head. This is her true story. Raised in Australia and born in New Zealand, Nancy Wake wasn't destined for a quiet life. At 16, she ran away from home and trained as a nurse. But adventure called to her. With a small inheritance from an aunt, she journeyed to New York, then London, determined to become a journalist. Vienna, 1933. Now a European correspondent, Nancy stood frozen on the street, watching in horror as Nazi thugs chained Jewish men and women together, whipping them in broad daylight. That moment changed her forever. She would later say,
"I saw a terrible thing, and I thought, whatever I can do to hurt them, I will do it."
She couldn't have known then that she would become one of World War II's most decorated heroines, or that she would one day kill a man with her bare hands to protect her fellow resistance fighters. But that's precisely what happened. By 1937, Nancy had fallen in love with a wealthy French industrialist, Henri Fiocca. They married in 1939, just months before Hitler's forces invaded France. While many fled, Nancy and Henri chose to stay and fight. Their wealth and social status provided the perfect cover for resistance activities. In the early days of the occupation, Nancy played the part of a socialite to perfection. She would later recall, with a glint in her eye,
"A little powder and a little drink on the way, and I'd pass their German posts and wink and say, 'Do you want to search me?'"
But beneath her charming exterior, she built an escape network for Allied soldiers, using her husband's money to buy ambulances and supplies. She joined the Pat O'Leary Escape Network, one of the war's most successful Allied escape lines. Her role was crucial. She obtained false papers, found safe houses, and guided Allied service members through treacherous territories. Each successful escape was a small victory against the Nazi regime she despised. The Gestapo grew suspicious. They tapped her phone and intercepted her mail, but could never quite catch her. Each time they got close, she would vanish like a ghost, only to surface somewhere else, continuing her work. She helped over 1,000 Allied servicemen escape through France and into Spain. Her methods were as clever as they were daring. She often disguised herself as a French farmer's wife, traveling through the countryside with Allied airmen posing as hard-of-hearing farmhands. If anyone spoke to them, their silence wouldn't raise suspicion. She created elaborate networks of safe houses, developed sophisticated codes, and stayed one step ahead of the German secret police. But in November 1942, everything changed. The Germans occupied all of France, and the net began closing in. Nancy had to flee, leaving behind the man she loved. The Gestapo captured Henri, who stayed behind to protect her escape. Despite brutal torture, he never revealed her location. They executed him, but Nancy wouldn't learn of his death until after the war. Her own escape was the stuff of legends. It took 6 attempts to cross into Spain. During one attempt, the Vichy militia took her captive and interrogated her for 4 days. She never broke. A resistance friend tricked her captors into releasing her, claiming she was actually his mistress trying to hide an affair. When she finally reached the Pyrenees, she crossed the snow-covered mountains on foot in the dead of winter, finally reaching Britain. But Nancy Wake continued fighting. She joined the British Special Operations Executive, an elite organization nicknamed Churchill's Secret Army. Her training was intense. Night parachuting, weapons and explosive handling, hand-to-hand combat, and silent killing techniques.
"I don't see why we women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then knit them balaclavas."
Her instructors noted she was a very good and fast shot, who put the men to shame. On April 29, 1944, she parachuted back into France's Auvergne region as part of a 3-person team codenamed Freelance. When she got tangled in a tree on landing, a French fighter named Henri Tardiva looked up and remarked,
"I hope all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruit this year."
"Cut out that bullshit and get me down."
She snapped. Her mission was crucial to the upcoming D-Day invasion. She was to coordinate with local Maquis resistance groups, organizing them into an effective fighting force. Within weeks, she had helped organize over 7,000 resistance fighters. She distributed weapons and supplies from Allied airdrops, established communication networks, and planned sabotage operations. In one of her most remarkable feats, she undertook a perilous bicycle journey that would become legendary. During a German raid, the group's radio operator had to destroy his codes, resulting in the loss of contact with London. Without those codes, they couldn't receive weapons drops or tactical information. Nancy volunteered for what seemed like an impossible mission: a 500-kilometer bicycle ride through German-occupied territory to find another radio operator and get new codes. For 72 hours, she pedaled through mountainous terrain, dodging German patrols and checkpoints. She rode until her legs ached and her hands were raw from gripping the handlebars, but she never stopped. When she finally returned with the codes, she hadn't slept in 3 days. But her mission was successful. She restored the Resistance's vital link to London. The battles intensified as D-Day approached. In June 1944, her group faced their greatest challenge when 21,000 German troops surrounded their position. Under heavy fire from aircraft, mobile guns and mortars, Nancy helped coordinate a 3-day fighting retreat. Though they lost 100 fighters, they inflicted over 1,350 casualties on the Germans. During one raid on a German installation, she encountered an SS sentry who could have raised the alarm. Without hesitation, she used her bare hands to kill him. "They taught this judo chop stuff with the flat of the hand at SOE," she explained years later.
And I practiced away at it, but this was the only time I used it, whack, and it killed him all right. I was really surprised.
She didn't just fight, she led. When she discovered that some resistance fighters were mistreating 3 young women, using them as prostitutes, she confronted the men directly. She forced them to release 2 of the women, but suspected the 3rd was a German spy. After interrogating and confirming her suspicions, Wake ordered the informer's execution. When the men hesitated to shoot, Wake's steel resolve convinced them it had to be done. By the war's end, Nancy Wake had become one of the most decorated servicewomen of World War II. She received the George Medal from Britain, the Medal of Freedom from America, and 3 Croix de Guerre, and the Médaille de la Résistance from France. But when asked about her medals late in life, she shrugged them off.
There was no point in keeping them. I'll probably go to hell and they'd melt anyway.
After the war, she learned of Henri's death and struggled with the guilt of leaving him behind. She worked for British intelligence, ran for political office in Australia, and eventually remarried. But she never forgot her wartime experiences or her first husband's sacrifice. Nancy Wake passed away in 2011 at the age of 98, having lived a life that reads like the most thrilling spy novel ever written. But every word of her story is true. They scattered her ashes near Montluçon, France, where she had fought so bravely for freedom. Today, the Australian War Memorial displays her medals, a testament to the courage of the woman who became the White Mouse. If you found Nancy Wake's story inspiring, you'll want to check out our videos on other remarkable people in history.